Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. My name is TJ Moffitt, and today we will be discussing law enforcement perception and race relations and partial fulfillment of the requirements of the University of San Diego's Law Enforcement and Public Safety Leadership Program. A 2015 Gallup poll showed confidence in law enforcement at a 22-year low of 52%. Law enforcement agencies nationwide are experiencing a recruitment crisis as departments struggle to fill positions. Even at my own department, nearly 10% of our open sworn positions remain unfilled, despite the institution of a full-time recruitment sergeant and recruitment incentives. This presentation is designed to examine some of the perceptions of existing law enforcement personnel and the public at large. We will also be looking at law enforcement's relationship with minority communities during a time of increased scrutiny of lethal uses of force involving blacks. It is important to note that this examination is a small cross-section of a sensitive national issue and is not meant to address every aspect of a complex situation. The two main pieces of material we'll be looking at today are Behind the Badge, a 2016 study published by the Pew Research Center, where nearly 8,000 police officers from across the nation were surveyed about how they view their profession, key issues, and recent fatal encounters between blacks and police. We'll also be taking a look at FBI Director James Comey's 2015 speech to Georgetown University, where he shared his thoughts on the state of law enforcement, race relations, and the path moving forward. So let's look at the Pew Research Center's report first. One of the most alarming things in this report was that around 72% of respondents said officers at their department are now less willing to stop and question suspicious persons. More than 8 in 10 say their job is harder as a result of recent high-profile incidents. Officers have become more concerned about their safety with an increased reluctance to use force when appropriate. While half of all officers say their job made them feel proud, the same amount said it left them frustrated. Nearly 90% felt the public understood the risks and challenges they faced, quote, not too well, end quote, or, quote, not well at all. The study highlights a divide between law enforcement and the public at large, with officers predominantly feeling high-profile, fatal police encounters with blacks were isolated incidents, while an inverse proportion of the public found it indicative of a larger issue. Another note of interest, there seemed to be a similar divide internally among white and black officers about the state of equality in the United States and the need for continued change. Now let's look at FBI Director James Comey's 2015 speech at Georgetown University. Director Comey identified our country and its relationship with law enforcement as being at a crossroads. He referenced the then recent high-profile shootings of black suspects as well as the assassination of 2 unsuspecting NYPD officers. Comey reiterated his affirmation that law enforcement is a noble profession, but that there is more work to do. He discussed deficiencies in voluntary UCR reporting and the frustration that it was easier to get data on book sales from Amazon than a national picture of how many people have been shot by the police. Comey also emphasized the importance of community-oriented policing and the challenges of recruiting and hiring a diverse workforce representative of our communities. The challenge of real and perceived biases and the need for an informed opinion were interwoven throughout his speech, as well as the theme that the time to act is now. What are the differences and similarities between these two pieces? The Pew Research Center identifies as a fact tank that collects data without taking a policy position. Its report was an introspective survey of police sentiment. Director Comey's speech also looked inward towards areas of improvement in law enforcement, but additionally identified steps that need to be taken as we progress forward. Comey, who is himself a representative of law enforcement, seemed willing to accept that there was more to current social issues than a misperception of a few isolated incidents, in contrast to the majority of Pew surveyed officers. While those officers expressed increased concern over community contacts, Director Comey emphasized the need for building community relationships, quote, spending years to build trust. Where the message seemed to align was that more needs to be done. Ironically, it seems both members of the law enforcement community and those of minority groups seem to feel misunderstood, underrepresented, and unsafe. So where do we go from here? As Director Comey said in his speech, we must see the people we serve. Progressive training in areas such as mental health, implicit bias, and procedural justice are cornerstones to building trust as we move forward. The 4 pillars of procedural justice are fairness, giving others a voice, being impartial in decisions, and transparent in our actions. As law enforcement leaders, it is important to note that studies show those agencies who follow these tenets internally with their own officers have a higher adoption rate when it comes to the officers' interactions with the community. Collectively, we must understand that our backgrounds, experiences, and social positions can influence our perceptions, and that we need to remain open to the idea that differences in those factors may cause others to see things differently than us. By accepting those differences and working to see things from each other's perspective, we can find common ground. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to view this presentation. The information contained herein was created with reference to the following resources.